seen out of that Louisville defense on film that makes them so effective at pushing the pocket?
I have a great, pretty good front seven. They're very active, very aggressive, and they're just, whatever their scheme is, they're trying to perfect that craft and playing their keys.
How different is this defense compared to what you faced last year?
I guess all those guys been in the system before, so they know what they're doing, and they have experience in doing that, the things that the coach wanted them, to do each and every week, and that's probably pretty much it.
Are you a guy that follows some other great quarterbacks and keeps track of what they're doing on a weekly basis? And what's your relationship like with Lamar, and what do you respect him for what he's done so far this year?
Nah, I don't. If I see it, I see it, but I don't really, go out my way to look up people's stats and see what they're doing. If I see it on, TV or, different things like that, then, I look at it. But that's pretty much it. And, I've talked to Lamar a couple times and met him before, but nothing too serious on that level.
You had a pretty abridged performance against them the first year as a freshman, played all the game last year. Didn't have a whole lot of success, I guess, maybe in either game. What did they do defensively that caused problems for you guys on offense?
First, we had success. We won, so
yeah.
on the road. So I take that back. We had success. Especially Thursday night. At that place, it's hard to do. So, but nothing there. We just didn't take advantage of the plays to blow games away. The first year I got hurt, so I couldn't finish the game. So, of course, I didn't have success because I didn't get to play. Last year we won, so that's all that matters. But at the end of the day, we just got to do what we do and beat Clemson.
I know you've said several times you embrace kind of the Heisman talk. Do you feel like this is a big stage, a chance for you to make a statement?
I guess so. I just do what I do and play my game and do what I do to win. And I can't control what people think about the Heisman. That's out my league. Like I said before, I can't go out there and say I'm the Heisman winner. I don't control that. You have voters that people think and what they feel like, who deserve that, award. And, I really can't control that. No one's going to win the Heisman in week 5. You got to, finish out the year and be consistent. So, Derrick Henry proved that last year. People didn't talk about him until like week 7. And, he ended up winning the Heisman. So, at the end of the day, we can only control what we can control and perform and do what we do on Saturdays.
Is it fair that everybody's saying this game is Deshaun versus Lamar and it's all about you two? Is it fair to people to assess this game that way?
I guess. All that talk is for, fans to, draw attention to this game. It's for media, for money, all that stuff. At the end of the day, it's Clemson versus Louisville. And, we're going to focus on what we got to do at Clemson and do what we got to do. We can't worry about, what Louisville is doing or what Lamar Jackson is doing. We got to focus on what we're doing and prepare throughout the week and, go out there on Saturday and execute.
In that same vein, you won't be on the field with him until post-game handshake, so you're not physically going against him. But do you enjoy that excitement of having to match up against another elite quarterback like that?
Yeah, it's competition. If you play this game, you wouldn't. All the great ones love the great competition, going against the best, regardless. And he's got to do what he's got to do. I got to do what I got to do. And we're both going against 2 good defenses on both sides. So we just got to go out there and do what we got to do and be ourselves.
Is there anything they've done different? Their defense has done differently the last 2 years against you. The abbreviated time you were in there 2 years ago, and then just last season.
Honestly, I'm not sure. It's just, like I said before, my freshman year, I got injured in the first quarter, so I couldn't play the rest of the game. Last year, they did what they did, and who knows what they're going to come out, this Saturday and do. Everything changes. Everyone have a scheme and different ways. No one's, they're going to go out there and do what they did the previous 4 years. There's always going to be something different each and every week.
It's obvious that this week's going to be a big game with game day coming in at 8 o'clock, ABC. You guys are used to the big game environment, but is there anything about this game in particular that has the team fired up in the background?
Just trying to be 1-0 this week. That's pretty much it. Still, having the same energy that we had before. preparing at the same, high intensity, high level. And, we just want to go out there and be, 1-0 this week and try to move on from there.
This offense took a major step last year when you started running the football a lot. I haven't seen that this year. Could this be the week that Deshaun, the running part of your game shows back up?
We'll see. It just depends on how the game plays out. If I have to run, I'll run. And, if, I don't need to, then, we won't force that role because we have running backs to run. And so we'll see what happens, throughout the week and what we game plan and throughout the course of the game. So it all just matters of what, type of defense they want to play against us.
How do you grade the offensive performance last Thursday?
It was pretty solid. We started off fast. And then, third quarter, Georgia Tech held it for 10, 11 minutes, so we only had 2 possessions. And then in the fourth quarter, we did what we did to, seal out the game and get out there with a win. And, it was a pretty solid performance, but, there's always still room for improvement.
What did that first half particularly do for your confidence?
We're a confidence football team regardless. And so, we know what we can do, and that's the type of ball we need to start playing. 60 minutes, and once we do that, it's going to be hard to stop us.
Louisville gets out to a fast start every week. It looks like for you guys, how important it is for you to kind of do what you did against Georgia Tech and kind of come out that same intensity, knowing that that's the way they've been playing.
There's always times for things like that, but we always stress starting off fast, jumping up on teams, and each possession we want to end on a kick, regardless if it's a punt, field goal, or a touchdown for an extra point. We always want to start fast, get points on the board each and every time we touch the ball, and so it's no different for us. We just do what we got to do.
When you get games like this where it's a national TV audience, battle top 5 teams, do you lean back on the big games that you played last year, just how calm you were, and what makes you that way when everything around you is bigger and amplified?
It's no different, regardless if it's, everyone's watching or no one's watching. You still, the yards and the lines of field, it's still, 53.3 yards across. It's 110 yards from, or 20 yards from one end of the touchdown to the other. It's still football, and, just more people watching. So, at the end of the day, you're still doing what you love to do. You've been doing it your whole life, and you just go out there and have fun doing it.
Is 60% completions lower than you would like?
I guess so. You always want to be good, but things happen. Just drop balls, incomplete, miss open receivers, people not on the same page, and it's still early on in the season. So, all that stuff, I don't really focus on. As long as we get the W, I'm fine.
Just evaluating, because you mentioned the drops, and there's been some miscommunication with Mike and all that. Would you say that you guys are in sync as much as you'd like through 4 games?
Nah, I feel we're pretty good. We have miscues here and there, and that's gonna happen. With any team. So just because all eyes is on us, and we had all the hype throughout the season, we on the we get overshadowed from all the good plays that we make, and just little miscues here and there. People want to bring up, and we can't focus on the miscues and things like that. We just got to improve on the the good things.
On the overthrows, have you gone back to see what's going on there again? You had 2 more last week. Is there anything mechanically happening while you were missing those plays?
Nah, just the timing, things like that, and people are going to have overthrows. I throw so many balls, and every ball is not going to be perfect. And things like that. So nothing really major that I can't fix.
You guys haven't seemed to run the ball quite as effectively on first down as you did last year. That seems like it's been related to maybe a few more passing plays on second. How crucial is it for you guys to be able to pick up good yardage on first down, whether it's on the ground or through there?
It's always good to get positive yards on the first down because it starts off the drive, with positive things, and it kind of open up the playbook even more. And what the defense have to do to scheme against us, and the play calling we can play our call. So that's the goal. Is always getting positive yards on the first down to start the drive off good.
Talk about playing Clemson and just being the best that you guys can be, but how do you define the identity of this team right now?
It's kind of hard because you gotta, each and every week is different, But this team is gonna play hard regardless of who we're playing against. We're gonna do what we do. The best is the standard, and we're gonna compete. And you're not just gonna walk over us. You got to bring your A game each and every week, and that's what we're about. And we love to compete at the highest level and win games.
Deshaun, the comfort level you must have watching your defense do what it's done so far. It must give you quite a security blanket knowing that even if you guys aren't misfiring, they're going to be there to kind of limit the other side.
Yeah, our defense has been doing a great job. Coach V has been scheming up well. All the players have been, doing their job and handling, their business. And, that's the beauty of, this football team is, we all three phases have, great players, and we, do what we have to do to, get the win and play as a team. And, we, compete against each other each and every day at practice to make each other better. And, when it comes on Saturdays, it's no shocker or, no really big surprise when we get out there on the field.
Deshaun, we've seen
Division so far. Lamar hasn't been over Florida State. What is the importance of this game when you look at one of those team goals is to win the division? Is this one of those situations where it's a game you feel like you gotta win?
I mean, every game you should feel that way. You want to win each and every game because you're a competitor and you want to win and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's still the next one. We want to be 1-0, and for us to, try to improve and be 5-0, we got to be 1-0 this week, and we just got to continue to do what we do and focus on the task at hand. And we can't worry about what the future brings or anything like that. At the end of the day, we still got to, go out there and play our best.
Have you seen Ray grow in the offense these last few weeks?
Yeah, he's been doing a great job of, doing what he's been taught in practice, and running the ball whenever the ball is in his hands and making plays, and that's the type of player he is.
Deshaun, what needs to happen to get the running game going a little bit more?
Just continue to do what we do, and things are going to open up. The defense got to stop wanting, so they either got to stop the pass or they got to stop the running game. And most teams want to take away the running game and make us pass. And if you do that, then we're going to pass more. But it just depends on what the defense is scheming and what they want to take away.
Deshaun, we've seen some of these anthem protests come down in college football. Now, you guys are not on the field during the anthem. Is that even a topic in the locker room for you guys that maybe, hey, we'd like to get our voices heard if we had the opportunity?
That's something that we don't really speak about, and that's in only what the team talks about. So, I really can't speak on too much of any of that.
I guess maybe a little bit along those lines. You had some quotes during the offseason about your frustrations about how black quarterbacks in particular that are athletic tend to get labeled as dual threats, and you didn't really like that perception. Lamar's another guy who has talked about how he wants to be considered a true quarterback, not just a mobile quarterback. Why is that issue so important to you? What made you say it? And why do you think that kind of perception persists among people?
Well, first, the issue wasn't anything about being racist or, just because I'm a quarterback, or a black quarterback, is dual threat. It was a one-on-one interview, open interview with me and the guy from Bleacher Report, and he was just talking about, different things like that. He brought it up about, most quarterbacks that are, black, or it's easy for them to, say that they're running quarterbacks and, they can do a lot of things, this and that. But, it wasn't so much of, being a racist because, my favorite quarterback growing up was Tim Tebow, and he ran the ball plenty of times. He threw the ball, so he was a dual threat and things like that. So none of that, had to do with being racist or being labeled because I'm, an African American. It's just, some things that, people grow up and, that's how it looks.
Do you feel like you had to prove yourself as a pocket passer as well? Do you think people kind of just assumed a little bit more about you being, a run-first guy? Was it important to you to prove that you were not necessarily that type of quarterback?
No, because, at this day and age, guys use their feet, to get out of plays and be able to run. There's a lot of quarterbacks that people consider as pocket passers, that get out of plays and can run the ball. So there's not so much I had to prove anything. I know I can throw, and that's all that matters. If I know I can pass the ball and sit in the pocket, and my teammates know the same thing, then I don't have to prove anything to anyone. People have their own opinions.
Deshaun, anything new on the playlist for pregame or any requests?
Same Future, Lucci, some Young Thug, Kodak Black. Just really anything. Get us turned.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming in.
No
Thank you
problem.
guys. Coach Scott.